Alright, we're on lesson 50. This is solving multi-step equations. And we've got our one objective up here, make sure you get it down, is to solve multi-step equations. We've got steps over here that we will go through one by one, but first let's look at the problem. You might want to pause this and write these steps down, and then go through the problem with me. It's kind of up to you though. So we're going to go through the problem here. Example 1 says, suppose a taxi charges $1.20 to start a ride plus 3 minutes per mile. So as soon as you step in the cab, you get charged $1.50. Okay, then it's $3 for every single mile you ride. If a ride costs $5.40, how far was the ride? It says let x represent the distance traveled in miles. And solve this equation to find the length of the ride. So we're saying 3 times x plus $1.20 equals $5.40. So we're saying $3 times every mile you drive plus the $1.20 it took to get in the cab equals $5.40. Alright, well, I'm going to rewrite this equation just so it's bigger and easier for me to work with here. And then we're going to go through step by step here. Equals 5.40. Okay, so first step, as usual, is to change subtraction to addition. Well, we have no subtraction here, so I get to skip that step. Okay, step 2 says to distribute. Okay, and again, we know if we need to distribute, if there's parentheses with something attached to the outside of them directly. Okay, well there's no parentheses in this, so we're not going to distribute. So we'll go on to step 3. Step 3 says to collect like terms. Okay, so if I look on the sides of the equal sign, we'll draw a little line down the middle of this here. Okay, if I look on the left side of the equal sign or the right side of the equal sign, I have to ask myself, are there any like terms to combine? Well, the only thing over here is $5.40. And over here I got x's plus $1.20. Those aren't the same because they don't have the same variable parts. So we move to step 4. Step 4 is to get the x term by itself. Okay, and what I mean by x term in this case, okay, is this part right here. Okay, that is the x term. Okay, basically it just means how many x's do we have? Okay, or what are we doing to x itself? So, I'm taking 3 times x. That's my x term. I had to get that by itself. So what I need to do is cancel out what's on the same side as the x term here. Okay, so I'm going to cancel out this positive $1.20 by doing negative 120 on each side. Okay, and actually I'm going to erase this and put this back in black pen here. Okay, so we're going to do negative $1.20 on each side. Because positive 120 and negative 120 cancel. And what that leaves me with now is my x term. And this time it's 3 x's. Okay? And then 540 minus 120. Well, that's 0, 2, and a 4. So I've got 3 times x equals $1.40 now. Or sorry, 3 times x equals $4.20. Now, my last step is to solve for x. Okay, because I've got my x term all by itself, the stuff that's attached directly to the x. Now I need to get x all by itself. So now this is just like equation we've had before. I'm taking 3 times x. I'm going to get rid of that by dividing by 3 on both sides. Because 3 divided by 3 gives me 1x. Then I've got to take $4.20 and divide it by 3. Well, 3 goes into 4 once. And I subtract. Bring my decimal point up here. 3 goes into 12 4 times. That's 12. And 3 goes into 0 0 times. So that's 140. So x equals 140. Now I'm going to write that to find out how long the ride was. Okay? Well, this means my ride was 1.40 miles. So the ride was 1.4 miles. That's how far we had to drive. Okay? Let's go on to another example. Right here, example 2, we've got negative 2x minus 5 equals 9. So again, step 1 is to change subtraction to addition. Okay, and that's after here. I'm going to go ahead and rewrite the problem down as it looks. Okay. We need to change subtraction to addition. So I'm taking negative 2x and I'm subtracting 5. So I'm going to change this to negative 2x. I change the minus to a plus. Minus and plus are opposites. So it means they're opposites. That means that this 5 has to go to its opposite, which is negative 5. Okay, so I change the subtraction to addition. Next, I look for any distributing I have to do. Okay, well, there's no distributing. I know that because I see no parentheses, so I can move on. The next thing we need to look for is, do I need to combine some like terms or not? And again, I need to think about the equation as two different sides here. So I need to know, are there any like terms on the left side or the right side? Well, the right side, there's only one term here, so there's no like terms to combine. Over here I got x's and things that aren't x's, so I cannot combine those together. So I move on to the next step. Again, the next step is to get the x term by itself. So again, we need to identify the x term. That's, what am I doing to x exactly? Okay, what's attached to the x? In this case, it's negative 2 times x, so that's the x term right here. So I need to get that all by itself. So to do that, I'm going to cancel out these counters right here. So I'm going to add positive 5 to both sides, because negative 5 and positive 5 cancel and leaves me with negative 2 times x, and 9 plus 5 is 14. Again, notice our x term didn't change here. It's negative 2 times x and negative 2 times x. Well, I'm taking negative 2 times x. I need to get x all by itself by doing the opposite of multiplying by negative 2, which is dividing by negative 2 on both sides. Negative 2 divided by negative 2 makes positive 1, which cancels and leaves me with just 1x. And 14 divided by negative 2 is negative 7. So x equals negative 7 on that one. Okay, let's go on to another example. Okay, example 3 says 3x plus 4 minus x equals 28. First thing I'm going to do is rewrite the problem. Now, instead of putting minus x, I'm going to change that to say minus 1x. Reason for that is because we have 1x here that we're taking away. So whenever there's no number in front of our variable, we can always put 1 there. And that will help our algebra, okay, our math. Help us figure out what exactly we need to do. So step 1 is change subtraction to addition. Well, my subtraction is right here. I'm taking away 1x. So I'm going to change this to 3x. The addition stays. I'm adding 4. But then I'm subtracting, so I'm going to change my subtraction to addition and change my circled part 1x to the opposite, which is negative 1x equals 28. Next thing I need to look for is distributing, and I don't need to distribute because there's no parentheses. So after that I go to like terms. Okay, well, over here I've got two sets of x's here, so I can combine those. Okay, they are like terms. So I'm going to take my 3x's and add negative 1x to them. 3x plus negative 1x gives me 2x's. And I've still got plus 4, so I bring that down, equals 28. Now again, I've got my x term right here. I need to get my x term by itself. So I'm going to cancel out my 4 positive counters that are over here with it by putting negative counters on each side. And positive 4 and negative 4 cancel, leave me with my x term, my 2x's, equals, and 28 minus 4 is 24. Now I'm going to finish this by dividing to get the x term by itself. I'm going to divide by a positive 2 on both sides. Leaves me with x equals, and 24 divided by 2 is 12. And that's my answer for number 3. Okay, again, things to make sure we're keeping in mind here as we go through this is when I get to something that looks like this, I always want to get the x term by itself. Okay, so the x term is my x and whatever is attached to it. Okay, that's always my x term. We get that by itself first, then we solve for the x. Okay, and we still got 3 more examples yet, so let's keep on moving along. Okay, here example 4 says x divided by 4 plus 6 equals negative 2. Again, first step never changes. First step is change subtraction to addition. Well, I've got no subtraction, so I don't need to mess with it. Next step, distribute. I don't see any parentheses, so I know how to distribute. So keep on going. combine like terms that are on the same side. Well, here I'm taking some x's and adding 6 to it. Those are not like terms. So now I need to get the x term by itself. Well, in this case, the x term is this part right here. Okay, that's the x term this time because it's the x and whatever is directly attached to it. So I'm taking x and dividing it by 4. That's my x term. So I need to get that by itself. I'm going to get that by itself by canceling out these 6 positive counters with 6 negative counters. Okay, and those cancel, and I've still got x divided by 4. And we got example 5, we've got negative 4 minus x equals 3. First step, change subtraction to addition. Well, here's my, or actually, sorry, first I want to rewrite this as negative 4 minus 1x. Okay, so I remember that this is 1x here. Now I'm going to change the subtraction to addition. So let's change the negative 4 plus the opposite of 1x is negative 1x. Now I need to get the x term all by itself. Well, my x term is right here, negative 1 times x. So I've got to cancel out the 4 positive counters on both sides. The reason I knew I needed to get x all by my x term all by itself right now is because I didn't have any distributing or like terms to worry about. So now I've got negative 1x equals, and 3 plus 4 is 7. Well, now to get x all by itself, I have to divide by the number that's on the same side as x. So I took negative 1 times x, so now I'm going to divide by negative 1 to get rid of that. Negative 1 divided by negative 1 cancels, leaves me with x equals, and 7 divided by negative 1 is negative 7. Alright, and let's move on to our last example, probably our most difficult one. And I added this as a bonus example because it's a good one and will challenge us a little bit here. So, I've got a lot of work here. First thing again is change subtraction to addition. So my subtraction is right here in the parentheses. So I'm going to have negative 2 times x. My minus changes to a plus. My 7 changes to its opposite. And everything else stays the same. Now we actually have a step 2 to worry about from our list of steps we had at the beginning where we need to distribute. We know we need to distribute because I see parentheses here. Now the only thing we need to pay attention to is, do I distribute the 2 or the 3? And I'm going to distribute the 2, or the negative 2, sorry, because it's attached directly to the parentheses, whereas the 3 is separated by a plus sign. Okay, so I'm going to take this negative 2 and distribute it to both of these parts here. So I'm going to have negative 2 times x plus, and then negative 2 times negative 7 is positive 14. So that's from distributing this. Negative 2 times x, negative 2 times negative 7, positive 14. I leave everything else, so I've still got plus 3 equals negative 7. Third step is to see if I have like terms to combine on the same side as the equal sign. Well, over here I've got a 14 and a 3 that I can combine together. Okay, so this 14 and this 3 are like terms. Everything else stays, so I got negative 2x plus, and then 14 plus 3 is 17, equals negative 7. Now I've got to get the x term all by itself. That's the next step. So I'm going to do that by adding negative 17 counters to both sides. Okay, so 17 plus negative 17 cancels, leaves me with negative 2x's, and negative 7 plus negative 17 is negative 24. And now the only thing I need to do is divide by negative 2 on each side, and I get x equals negative 24 divided by negative 2 is positive 12. Okay? And that's it for our lesson. I know there's a lot of examples, a lot of steps on this, but if you make sure that you follow the steps directly, then this should not be a problem. Okay? It's not overly difficult as long as you follow the steps. So it'd probably be a good idea to have your notes handy when you do these assignments. So happy homeworking.